My wife's friends encouraged her affair with our regular delivery driver, telling her she deserved better than my work schedule. When I discovered the affair and confronted them, they blamed me, saying my workaholic lifestyle pushed her away and I should understand why she needed emotional support. I recorded their intervention meeting where they defended the affair, then played it at our divorce mediation. I'm Marcus, 34, and I work as a veterinary surgeon at a large animal hospital. It's demanding work that often requires long hours, emergency surgeries, and weekend shifts, but I love what I do and I've always been good at balancing my career with my personal life. Until 6 months ago, I thought my wife understood and supported my dedication to saving animals' lives. I was wrong about a lot of things. My wife Bethany, 31, works as a part-time administrative assistant at a dental office. We've been married for 7 years, together for 9. She's always known that veterinary medicine is unpredictable. Animals don't schedule their emergencies for convenient times. I've missed some dinners, had to reschedule date nights, and worked through a few weekends, but I've always tried to make up for it by planning special trips, surprise gifts, and giving her my full attention when I'm home. Bethany has a close group of friends from college who meet regularly for what they call wine nights. The core group consists of Vanessa, 32, who's been through 2 divorces and works in real estate, Chloe, 30, who's single and works as a personal trainer, and Meredith, 33, who's married to a man she constantly complains about and works part-time at a boutique. I've always found their friendship dynamic a bit toxic. They spend most of their time together complaining about men, relationships, and their lives, but I never interfered because Bethany seemed to enjoy their company. The problem started about 8 months ago when Bethany began working from home more often due to changes at her dental office. She'd always been social, but her increased isolation seemed to make her more dependent on her friends' opinions and more susceptible to their negativity about marriage and relationships. Around the same time, we started using a local delivery service called Quick Eats for grocery deliveries and restaurant orders. The service was convenient for our busy schedules, especially when I was working late and Bethany didn't want to cook. Our regular delivery driver was a guy named Derek, 29, who worked for multiple delivery services and always seemed friendly and professional. At first, I didn't think much about Derek beyond appreciating that he was reliable and polite. He'd deliver our orders, Bethany would tip him through the app, and that was the extent of our interaction. But over time, I started noticing that Bethany would mention Derek more frequently in casual conversation. Derek said the restaurant was really busy tonight, or Derek recommended this new place he thinks we'd like, or Derek mentioned that his roommate works at that vet clinic across town. None of it seemed particularly significant at the time, just friendly small talk between a customer and service provider. But about 6 months ago, I noticed that our delivery orders were becoming more frequent and often seemed unnecessary. We'd order single items or small meals that would have been easier and cheaper to pick up ourselves. When I mentioned this to Bethany, she said it was more convenient and that Derek was always happy to deliver even small orders. I also started noticing that Bethany would get dressed up on days when we had deliveries scheduled, even if she was just staying home. When I commented that she looked nice, she'd say she just felt like putting in effort or looking presentable. Again, nothing that seemed alarming on its own. The real red flag started appearing about 4 months ago during one of Bethany's wine nights at our house. I was in my home office catching up on patient files when I overheard parts of their conversation from the living room. "Girl, Derek is so much more attentive than Marcus," I heard Vanessa say. "When was the last time Marcus even noticed a new outfit or asked about your day?" "Derek always takes time to actually talk to me," Bethany replied. "Even when he's busy with other deliveries, he makes me feel like I matter." "That's because Derek sees you as a woman, not just a wife who's supposed to be grateful for whatever attention she gets," Chloe added. I felt uncomfortable hearing this conversation, but I told myself it was just girl talk and complaint sessions that friends have. I didn't want to be the husband who eavesdropped on his wife's private conversations with her friends. But the comments continued throughout the evening, and they became more pointed. "Marcus is always at that stupid job," Meredith said. "When do you even spend time together anymore? And when he is home, he's always tired or distracted," Vanessa added. "Derek actually listens when you talk. He's present. You deserve someone who prioritizes you," Chloe said. "Life's too short to be with someone who takes you for granted." The conversation made me realize that Bethany had been sharing intimate details about our marriage with her friends, and they were actively encouraging her to be dissatisfied with our relationship. I decided I needed to make more effort to be present and attentive when I was home. Over the next few weeks, I started leaving work earlier when possible, planning more date nights, and trying to be more emotionally available. I thought things were improving between us, but I noticed that our delivery orders continued to increase, and Bethany seemed more interested in her phone than in spending quality time together. 3 months ago, I had to work late on a Saturday night for an emergency surgery. A dog had been hit by a car and needed immediate treatment to save its life. I texted Bethany to let her know I'd be late and that she should order dinner without me. When I got home around 11 p.m., exhausted but grateful that we'd saved the dog, I found a Quick Eats bag on our kitchen counter with a note from Derek. "Hope you enjoy. Thanks for being such a great customer. D." Something about the personal note bothered me. Delivery drivers don't usually leave handwritten notes for customers, especially not ones that reference being great customers. When I asked Bethany about it, she said Derek had mentioned that we were some of his favorite customers because we always tipped well and were friendly. But when I looked at the receipt, I noticed that the order had been placed at 7 p.m. and delivered at 7:45 p.m. If Derek had delivered the food at 7:45, why was Bethany still eating when I got home at 11? And why did the food still seem fresh? When I asked Bethany about the timing, she seemed flustered and said she'd reheated the food because she'd been distracted by a movie and hadn't eaten right away. Her explanation felt rehearsed, but I didn't want to seem paranoid by pushing the issue. 2 weeks later, I came home early from work as a surprise, hoping to spend some unexpected time with Bethany. When I pulled into our driveway around 3 p.m., I saw Derek's delivery car parked outside our house. I sat in my car for a moment, confused about why there would be a delivery when we hadn't ordered anything that I knew of. I waited about 10 minutes, expecting Derek to come out with an empty delivery bag after dropping off whatever Bethany had ordered. Instead, Derek emerged from our house looking relaxed and comfortable, not like someone who had just made a quick delivery. He was laughing about something, and I could see Bethany in our doorway, also laughing. They seemed to be having some kind of extended conversation or goodbye. When Derek finally left and I went inside, I asked Bethany what she'd ordered. She seemed startled to see me home early and said she'd just gotten some coffee and pastries as an afternoon treat. But I didn't see any coffee cups or pastry boxes anywhere, and there was no delivery receipt. "Where's the food you ordered?" I asked. "Oh, I already ate it," she said quickly. "I was hungry and Derek was running late, so I finished everything before he left." The explanation didn't make sense. If she'd already eaten the food, why was Derek there for so long? And why did they both seem so happy and comfortable when he was leaving? That night, I started paying closer attention to our credit card statements and delivery app history. What I found was disturbing. We'd been placing delivery orders almost daily, often multiple times per day, and always requesting Derek as the driver when possible. The orders were frequently small and inexpensive, single drinks, small snacks, or items that seemed designed to create opportunities for Derek to come to our house rather than to actually get food we needed. I also noticed that many of the orders were placed during times when I was at work, and they often coincided with Bethany's days off or work from home days. I started coming home at random times over the next 2 weeks, and I frequently found Derek's car in our driveway. Each time, Bethany had some explanation for why he was there. He was delivering something, he had gotten the wrong address and was asking for directions, he was returning a credit card that had fallen out of her wallet. The excuses were always plausible but felt increasingly forced. 3 weeks ago, I decided to install a simple security camera at our front door. I told Bethany it was for package security since we'd been getting more deliveries. She seemed nervous about the camera but didn't object directly. The camera footage from the first week was eye-opening. Derek was coming to our house nearly every day, often staying for 30 to 45 minutes at a time. These weren't quick deliveries, they were extended visits. On days when there were supposed to be deliveries, Derek would arrive empty-handed and leave empty-handed, suggesting that the deliveries were just pretexts for visits. But the most damning footage came last Tuesday. I was working a long shift at the hospital and wasn't expected home until late. The camera showed Derek arriving at our house around 2 p.m. with no delivery bag. He used a key to enter our house, a key that he clearly had access to regularly. Derek stayed until almost 6 p.m., leaving just an hour before I typically get home from work on Tuesdays. I knew I had to confront Bethany, but I wanted to gather more information first. I checked our delivery app history and found that no orders had been placed on Tuesday, confirming that Derek's visit had nothing to do with his job. That night, I sat Bethany down and asked her directly about her relationship with Derek. "Bethany," I said, "I need you to be completely honest with me. What's really going on between you and Derek?" Her face went pale, and she immediately became defensive. "What do you mean? Derek's just our delivery driver. Why are you asking me that?" "Because I've been paying attention, and Derek seems to be at our house a lot more than a delivery driver should be. And today, he was here for 4 hours when we didn't even place an order." She was quiet for a long moment, and I could see her calculating what to say. "Marcus, you're being paranoid. Derek is a friend. Yes, we talk when he comes by, but that's because you're never here and I get lonely. He's a nice person who actually takes time to have conversations with me." "Bethany, are you having an affair with Derek?" She immediately started crying and accused me of not trusting her, being controlling, and trying to isolate her from her friendships. She said that if I spent more time at home and paid more attention to her, she wouldn't need to find companionship elsewhere. Companionship elsewhere was an interesting way to describe whatever was happening with Derek. "So you admit there's something going on with Derek?" "There's nothing going on," she said through tears. "Derek is someone who listens to me and makes me feel valued. That's more than I can say for my own husband." I asked her directly, "Have you been physically intimate with Derek?" She hesitated just long enough to give me my answer. "Marcus, you've pushed me away with your work obsession. You care more about sick animals than you do about your own wife. If I've found emotional support somewhere else, that's because you haven't been providing it at home." She never actually denied the physical relationship, and her response made it clear that she blamed me for whatever was happening between her and Derek. I told Bethany that I needed some time to process everything and that I'd be staying at my brother's house for a few days. She immediately called her friends, and within an hour, Vanessa was at our house for an emergency support session. 2 days later, while I was staying at my brother's place and trying to figure out how to handle the situation, I received a group text from Bethany's friends asking me to meet them for a conversation about Bethany's well-being. The text was signed by all 4 women, Bethany, Vanessa, Chloe, and Meredith, and it was framed as an intervention for my workaholism and neglect of my marriage. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet them at a coffee shop near our house. I thought maybe there was a chance to save our marriage if I could understand their perspective and address their concerns about my work schedule. I should have known better. Update 1. The intervention meeting was one of the most surreal experiences of my life. I arrived at the coffee shop expecting a difficult but potentially productive conversation about marriage, work-life balance, and Bethany's feelings of neglect. Instead, I walked into what felt like a coordinated attack designed to make me accept responsibility for Bethany's affair. Before I even sat down, I started recording the conversation on my phone. Something about the way they'd set up the meeting, choosing a public place, asking me to come alone, framing it as an intervention for my behavior, made me think I might need documentation of what was said. Vanessa immediately took charge of the conversation. "Marcus, we're here because we care about Bethany and we care about your marriage. But we need you to understand how your actions have affected Bethany's emotional well-being." I said I was willing to listen and asked them to explain their concerns. "Bethany has been lonely and neglected for months," Chloe said. "You're always at work, and when you are home, you're too tired to give her the attention she needs. A marriage requires 2 people who are present and engaged," Meredith added. "Bethany has been essentially living like a single woman because you've prioritized your career over your relationship." I acknowledged that veterinary work is demanding and asked what specific changes they thought would help. That's when Vanessa dropped the bombshell. "Marcus, we know about Derek. And while we don't condone infidelity, we understand why Bethany was drawn to someone who actually pays attention to her." I was stunned. They were openly acknowledging that they knew about the affair, and they were defending it. "Derek has been a source of emotional support for Bethany during a really difficult time in your marriage," Chloe explained. "He listens to her, he makes her feel valued, and he's shown her what it feels like to be prioritized by someone." "We're not saying what happened was right," Meredith said, "but we understand why it happened. Bethany was starving for attention and affection, and Derek provided what you weren't providing at home." I asked them directly, "Are you seriously sitting here defending my wife's affair?" "We're explaining the context that led to Bethany seeking connection elsewhere," Vanessa said. "This didn't happen in a vacuum, Marcus. This happened because you created an environment where Bethany felt unloved and unimportant." Bethany, who had been mostly quiet up to this point, finally spoke up. "Marcus, Derek never would have become important to me if you had been meeting my emotional needs. I tried to tell you I was lonely, I tried to get your attention, but you were always too busy or too tired. So instead of having a conversation with me about feeling neglected, you decided to have an affair?" "It wasn't supposed to become an affair," she said. "Derek was just someone who made me feel good about myself. But when you're getting emotional support and genuine affection from someone outside your marriage, and you're getting nothing from your husband, feelings develop." "Feelings develop," I repeated. "Is that what we're calling it?" "Marcus, you're being sarcastic and defensive instead of taking responsibility for your role in this situation," Vanessa said. "Bethany made a mistake, but you created the conditions that made that mistake inevitable." The conversation continued for another hour, with all 4 women taking turns explaining why Bethany's affair was ultimately my fault. According to them, my work schedule had emotionally abandoned Bethany, my dedication to my career showed that I didn't prioritize our marriage, my tiredness after long surgeries meant I was emotionally unavailable, my failure to notice Bethany's obvious signs of unhappiness proved I was checked out of our relationship, Derek had simply filled a void that I had created through my neglect. They kept using phrases like "Bethany deserves better," "You pushed her into Derek's arms, and this wouldn't have happened if you were a better husband." At one point, Chloe actually said, "Derek has shown Bethany what it feels like to be cherished by a man. Can you honestly say you've made her feel cherished lately?" I asked Bethany directly, "Do you take any responsibility for having an affair instead of talking to me about problems in our marriage?" Her answer was telling. "Marcus, I tried to talk to you. I told you I was lonely. I asked you to spend more time at home. You said you'd try, but nothing really changed. When someone is offering you the emotional connection you're craving, and your husband is offering you excuses about work, what do you expect to happen? I expect my wife to remain faithful to our marriage vows and have an honest conversation with me instead of sleeping with the delivery driver." "That's exactly the kind of response that shows you don't understand the emotional context of this situation," Vanessa said. "You're focused on blame and betrayal instead of understanding the underlying issues that led to this point." By the end of the meeting, they had presented me with a list of changes I needed to make to save our marriage: reduce my work hours significantly and turn down emergency cases when possible, attend couples therapy to address my workaholism and emotional unavailability, make amends to Bethany for driving her to seek connection elsewhere, accept that Derek had provided something important for Bethany during a difficult time, focus on rebuilding trust by proving I could prioritize Bethany over my career. At no point did anyone suggest that Bethany needed to take responsibility for having an affair, end her relationship with Derek, or make changes to her own behavior. When I pointed this out, Meredith said, Bethany's already suffering enough from the guilt of this situation. What she needs now is support and evidence that you're committed to being a better husband. I left the meeting feeling like I'd entered an alternate reality where infidelity was justified as long as you could blame the betrayed spouse's work schedule. Update 2. I filed for divorce the next week. The intervention meeting had made it clear that Bethany and her friends genuinely believed that my career in veterinary medicine was sufficient justification for her to have an affair, and that I should be grateful for the wake-up call about my failings as a husband. But the real vindication came during our divorce mediation 3 weeks later. Bethany's attorney had apparently been coached by her friends about the emotional neglect narrative, because she came to mediation with a prepared statement about how my work schedule had created an emotionally abusive environment that had driven Bethany to seek support outside the marriage. Her lawyer actually argued that I should pay additional spousal support because my career obsession had prevented Bethany from feeling secure and valued in the relationship. That's when I played the recording from the intervention meeting. I'd told my attorney about the conversation, but hearing the actual audio was powerful in a way that my description couldn't capture. The mediator and Bethany's attorney listened to 45 minutes of Bethany and her friends explicitly defending her affair, blaming me for creating the conditions that made infidelity inevitable, and arguing that Derek had provided emotional support that justified their relationship. The recording included Vanessa saying, Derek has shown Bethany what it feels like to be cherished by a man, and Bethany herself saying, when someone is offering you the emotional connection you're craving, and your husband is offering you excuses about work, what do you expect to happen? Bethany's attorney was clearly blindsided by the recording. She asked for a recess and spent 30 minutes in private consultation with Bethany, probably explaining that openly defending an affair was not a good legal strategy. When mediation resumed, Bethany's entire approach had changed. She was no longer claiming emotional abuse or demanding additional support. Instead, her attorney focused on basic asset division and requested that the recording not be used in future proceedings. But the damage was done. The recording made it clear that Bethany had not only had an affair but had actively justified it with her friends, blamed me for her choices, and felt entitled to Derek's emotional support because of perceived problems in our marriage. My attorney used the recording to argue that Bethany had shown no remorse for her infidelity and no commitment to preserving our marriage, which affected the division of assets and spousal support calculations. The most satisfying part of the mediation came when the mediator asked Bethany directly, Mrs. Peterson, do you believe your husband's work schedule justified having an extramarital affair? Bethany, clearly coached by her attorney during the recess, said, no, I take full responsibility for my choices. But then I played another clip from the recording where she said, Marcus, Derek never would have become important to me if you had been meeting my emotional needs. The mediator looked at Bethany and said, these statements seem contradictory. Either you take full responsibility for your choices, or you believe your husband's behavior justified your affair. Which is it? Bethany couldn't answer the question without either contradicting her previous statement or admitting that she still blamed me for her infidelity. We reached a settlement that day. Bethany got minimal spousal support for a short duration, and I kept most of our joint assets, including our house. Her attorney advised her to accept the terms rather than risk having the intervention recording played in front of a judge. The aftermath has been interesting. Bethany's friend group has apparently split up over the situation. Meredith reached out to me privately to apologize, saying that she'd gotten caught up in groupthink and realized after hearing the recording that they'd been encouraging destructive behavior rather than helping Bethany address legitimate marriage problems. Chloe doubled down on defending Bethany and sent me a nasty message saying I was vindictive for recording a private conversation and using it against Bethany in court. She said I'd proven that I was controlling and manipulative. Vanessa seemed to disappear from the situation entirely. According to Meredith, Vanessa realized that her role in encouraging the affair could potentially affect her real estate license if it became public, so she distanced herself from Bethany to protect her career. Derek, meanwhile, lost his job with Quick Eats when I reported his inappropriate relationship with a customer. The company has policies against drivers developing personal relationships with customers, especially ones that involve having keys to customers' homes. Derek apparently tried to argue that he and Bethany were just friends, but the timeline of their relationship and the evidence of his extended visits to our house made it clear that he'd been violating company policy for months. Bethany is now living in a small apartment and working full-time since she's no longer receiving significant spousal support. She's also apparently no longer in contact with Derek, though I don't know if that's by choice or because he's moved on to other customers. I've learned a lot from this experience about the importance of choosing a partner who takes responsibility for their actions rather than blaming external circumstances for their choices. I've also learned to be wary of friend groups that encourage destructive behavior rather than promoting honest communication and problem solving. My work schedule hasn't changed significantly. I'm still a veterinary surgeon who sometimes works long hours to save animals' lives. But I'm now in a relationship with someone who respects my career and would never use my professional dedication as an excuse for infidelity. We communicate openly about our needs and concerns, and we address problems directly rather than seeking emotional support from other people. The intervention recording has become something of a legend among my friends and colleagues. Several people have said it perfectly captures the mental gymnastics that people do to justify infidelity by blaming the betrayed partner. My attorney said it was one of the clearest examples she'd ever seen of someone refusing to take responsibility for their actions while simultaneously admitting to those actions. Sometimes I wonder if Bethany and her friends genuinely believed that my work schedule justified her affair, or if they were just trying to manipulate me into accepting blame for her choices. Either way, the recording provides clear evidence of their thought process and Bethany's complete lack of remorse for betraying our marriage. I'm grateful that I had the foresight to document the conversation, because without it, I might have actually started to believe that I was somehow responsible for my wife's decision to cheat with our delivery driver.